Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, senior leaders. It's Alicia Cowan. Welcome to episode number 53 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. It is the weekend right before Thanksgiving as I'm recording this, and I am in some ways getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday. My stepdad, my mom, my brother are all coming to spend the day with us and have a pretty low-key holiday. We'll just have a meal with just us and probably jump in the pool. And yes, it is that warm that we can still do that here in Florida, which is just lovely. But really, this next week, it's really all about kind of getting ready for the Christmas season. My daughter explained to me that now in this family of Christmas fanatics, it goes the Halloween holiday, then Christmas season, and then Thanksgiving for one day. It gets one day, and then it goes to the Christmas season, back to the Christmas season through the rest of the year. So I have my marching orders, and that's what we're doing. So doing a lot of prep, really. We're having a lot of family come in for the Christmas week, and then a really great group of friends coming in for New Year's. We always throw an annual New Year's party, and so we'll have some people coming in. And so really, I'm getting ready for that. So I hope you all are having a really great holiday season. And, as we are thinking about wrapping up the end of the year, I have a topic today that's come up that I want to address about knowing your worth. And particularly it comes up when thinking about your salary and salary negotiations or getting an offer and really thinking about the compensation that one gets for a role. And so I've had a couple of people that I've been coaching around getting new roles, getting promoted to different roles. And this topic of knowing your worth had come up in a group coaching session where we were talking through an offer that someone was getting. And so I want to ask you, maybe it's, a meme, or maybe it's a girl power or guy power or whatever on social media of that quote of know your worth and that like chant. And I think it's more recent, right? Really like knowing your worth when you're getting ready to go into a salary negotiation. And I want to challenge that popular notion of knowing your worth, because I believe that you cannot equate your worth as a human or your intrinsic value and what you bring to equate that with a salary or a job title. And so I want to talk about how, a coach also can help when senior leaders are navigating some of these high stakes conversations and have more clarity and more confidence and certainty when they go into these conversations regarding salary. So that's where we're going to dive into today. So let's start off. I want to talk about why knowing your worth in that statement, why I believe it doesn't belong in salary negotiations. And so a lot of people believe that when you say that phrase of knowing your worth, a lot of people believe that their intrinsic worth as a human is equated to what that company can pay, right? And I firmly believe that our intrinsic worth and our value as a human being goes far beyond what any organization can pay you. So to me, a salary and compensation is not a reflection of our human value. I believe firmly, and I know for a fact, that there is no other human on this planet that is like you. I can not even know who you are, but all of you listening to this, I know there's no other you. And so how in the heck would a company evaluate a human and say, and equate that salary to say, yes, this is your worth? So to me, it's separating those two. What a company can pay you and knowing your worth. And that's, as a coach, that's what I try to help leaders do, is to understand and reframe their mindset around approaching these conversations without tying their identity or their self-worth to the outcome. Because like at times that's what happens is we really get so entrenched in our work and we identify so closely with our title and our pay. And those things are important, but they are not everything that we are. And so it's really important to separate the two. And so example that I was sharing earlier was I was coaching a client around struggling with that concept of how as she's going through the job search process and she's trying to find the right fit, knowing that companies are going to pay a certain amount based on the role and the level of responsibility, and helping her to shift the perspective to understand that it's healthier to think about her worth as something completely separate. And so when she got an offer, it was, a question of like, what is negotiable and how much am I willing to compromise on my worth? And the question is more so just what is negotiable? And truly, I believe everything is typically negotiable. Now, whether or not they'll say yes or not on that negotiation, that's another question. But typically in the negotiation process, you can ask for anything. Just doesn't mean they'll be granting it. But when you're thinking about those negotiations and understanding your worth, you've got to separate the two. And so that's what we were working through together, is to understand how to get the offer that met her requirements and her needs and her wants, without making it mean anything about her as a human being. And so let's talk about what the salary really represents when you're going through negotiations. A salary is a transaction. It's not a valuation. So describing a salary is truly an exchange in my mind. It's an exchange where an associate's going to come in and they're going to provide services. And typically, and of course, I'm talking to executives on this podcast, right? So typically what we're doing is providing services. It's not time. And some people perceive it sometimes as time. It's actually services that we're providing in exchange for that compensation. Okay. And how companies determine this and what goes into in salary in this offer is companies go through and they break down and assess pay based on, number one, they look at a job description and they don't just look at the title, because we all know in certain companies, you could be a vice president in two different companies. It can mean very different things based on that company's size and structure, et cetera. So they don't typically just look at the title. They actually mainly focus on the job description and the job duties and the job responsibilities and the requirements. So, tenure that's required, education that's required, all of that, but for that job. And then they look at the market conditions and they go out, and companies typically purchase survey data. They go out and they look at, there's so many different surveys that are available, but they'll go out and they'll look at different surveys and purchase that data to be able to start to compare the company's requirements for the job duties to what is being out there in the market and paid in the market. And this survey data and this intel on what other companies are paying, it's again, similar descriptions of job duties and skills that are required. It is not typically based on that title. And you do this comparison, right? And then they take a look at what makes sense for the pay band within their company. And then this is an arbitrary number. They just decide. And I find it so fascinating because, again, I've just spent decades in HR. And so I've understood this process. While I wasn't ever in compensation myself, I was very closely intertwined with the compensation teams. And I've seen the back end of so many different offers and understood how this works. And I think it's super fascinating that we all just align and decide as all these companies to say, yeah, this is kind of what we've all decided that we will pay for these job duties. And it's arbitrary. It really is. And so I think it's important to know that and to understand how these roles are being evaluated. And it's understanding that even your own personal value versus the job requirements may not be considered as part of the role. So we may have amazing talents and skills and maybe education that are not required to be a part of that job and that job description and that role. And the companies, they don't consider those additional skills in those pay decisions all the time because they're not actually paying for those extra abilities. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes I think leaders go out and get secondary degrees, right? Or they get maybe even more degrees than just two, right? They may go and get an MBA or PhD, et cetera, right? So a lot of people want to be paid for that additional education. And sometimes people get really frustrated when they don't get paid more money because they have an MBA or a PhD. But if the job doesn't require it, the company typically is not like looking to say, oh, well, this individual has it, so we're going to kick them an extra however many tens of thousands of dollars or whatever it may be onto their base comp. It's not a factor in the decision at all. And I think sometimes people get really frustrated by that. But I think understanding how comp works and understanding it, the compensation decision, yes, while going through the interview process, an individual is being considered and they're looked at based on their background and their tenure and their experience. The compensation may not change based on those add-ons or those additional skills that are unique to you and your background. Okay, it may play a factor, but typically, if it's outside it and the company doesn't require it, it's typically not. It may be a benefit, so I don't want to say that. I don't want to. Please don't mistake my message as that it's not a good thing if you have additional education or experience. It's amazing. It's great. And there's nothing wrong with it. And actually probably enhances you as an individual. But I think just understanding if it's not required by the company, it doesn't mean the company is going to value it in the way perhaps that you would like from a monetary perspective. And so that's my firm belief, is that a human is so much more than your job description. I think humans are multidimensional. Each person has so many unique skills, backgrounds, talents outside of their professional role, and they just cannot be monetized in a job. And so my belief is that human worth and your worth is priceless. And so to even quote that is a complete incorrect description to equate that to compensation from a company, an organization. And so that's where I wanted to make sure that we understood like the difference between the two. So knowing all of that, the why behind it, I want to talk about how should you approach salary and potential negotiations. And so my tip would be to focus on market value and not self-worth. And so you can frame up those salary discussions around the market value and the job demands, the job description, the responsibilities, the skills, rather than a personal worth conversation. So here's my tips. And also, I want to say working with a coach can help prepare you from for that conversation and shift it away from trying to prove your worth and to more like presenting yourself and the unique contributions in a way that resonates with those decision makers, because you're really honing into like what the value of the role is and what the value of that job is versus trying to tie it to something that they're not seeing the equitable value in. And so as a coach, I typically try to help people with the market data and understanding the relevant market data to craft the case for the compensation request and just to practice like articulating your value very clearly and confidently. And also, it sometimes can help to go through and role play and simulate like a real life salary negotiation and help get the tools that you need to handle some objections or to help advocate for themselves. I find this is really a skill that sometimes people just don't focus on just because we don't do it often. And so sometimes it's something that we just try to white knuckle it through instead of really preparing for. And so that's what I try to do when I'm trying to help people through it. So my tips, if you want to do this work, is to go through and try to understand what are industry standards for these type of roles. And there's so many places, again, you can just Google it, but you can go out there and try to understand what out there is on the internet. And I'll give a big asterisk to this because I've had people bring me information on the internet. Take it all with a grain of salt because what you have out there on the internet isn't always the most relevant information. I'd say that, like a LinkedIn is pretty great at like now showing some pay transparency. But also I've seen it be very wrong. So I'd say, do your research, get, as much as you can potentially from the internet, but also use your network and understanding from real humans that do this type of work, what the industry standards look like for the role that you're looking at. And second, I would say work on getting clear on the value that you bring to the specific role. So what are those skill sets that you have and the background that you have that are required for this job? And then work through your negotiation skills and use data to work through that conversation rather than emotion based on your worth. And so that's what I'd like to say. Those are kind of the tips that I have. And I would like to reassure you that no matter what the outcome of that conversation, your self-worth is completely untouched. The job, the salary does not define you as a person. I know the more senior and the more tenured and high level that one can be, sometimes people start to intertwine those amazing titles and salaries that you can get as a senior leader, and they really intertwine it with their self-worth. But I assure you that they are completely separate, and your self-worth is priceless and immeasurable. And that's what a coach can help do, is help someone stay grounded too, and focusing on the strategic side of negotiation for salary over emotion, because it can be, even if you're a great negotiator for contracts or for your own business, sometimes when it's personal and it's your salary, sometimes emotions can take over. And so that's what the help can be through coaching, is to maintain that sense of confidence no matter what the outcome is. So my final thoughts, I'd like you to think about the phrase "know your worth" is to mean understanding and valuing yourself in a way that goes way beyond any job or salary. But I do acknowledge there is an emotional aspect of wanting to feel valued, but reminding you as a leader that self-worth is an inside job, not an external job, and you cannot delegate it to a company that's hiring you to do a job. And so as an executive coach, I can help you stay aligned with your values and maintain that perspective, and help you if you want to negotiate from a place of strength rather than that place of insecurity. So that's what I have for you. If you want to talk through, your next salary negotiation from a place of empowerment, where you're not trying to prove your worth, but because you're really clear, I invite you to connect with me. I will help you get super clear on what goals you have for that salary. I'll help you prepare for those high stake conversations, and I'll help you with the confidence to advocate for yourself, and not just at the negotiating table, but in every aspect of you as a senior leader. So don't hesitate to reach out. I am available on my website. It's EliciaCowan.com. It's ElisiaKeown coaching.com. And you can schedule a free consult conversation. We can talk through maybe this salary negotiation that you have ahead of you, and we can start to dissect and see how we could potentially work together to support you. All right. Well, thank you as always for listening. And if you're listening to this during the holiday season, have a great holiday season. I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.